it's Will Nash joining us. Hey there, Will.
What up?
Thank you guys so much for having me here today. It's great to actually, kind of hang out for a little bit, right? We don't get to really do that right now.
Well, so weird. You've been back for what, almost a year now? I haven't even seen you in person.
I know it's been like 10 months. I guess September will be a full year, and it's just been like the best year, but also like the craziest year in so many ways.
Is there anybody that you do see maybe once every couple of weeks, that maybe there's overlap with, maybe he's leaving the studio as you're coming in, because you come in super early? Is there anybody that you love seeing around the workplace?
Ali from our midday show is amazing.
I meant more so
and
that's on the call.
So, it's just great seeing her every day. I mean, unfortunately, you and I don't really bump into each other. So, but shout out to Ali from the midday show. Love her.
Yeah, unfortunately, you don't bump into them.
Thank you, Paul.
I have to commend you. First of all, your words, you were going to cry. So I said, was there anything you don't want to talk about today that you don't feel comfortable talking about? And I probably shouldn't have asked you that with Matt around, because now he'll deliberately talk about that.
That's right.
No, he probably will, but you know what? I came prepared for these sort of occasions, Tara. I have my box of Kleenex right here to the left of me. Just opened it up last night, so we're good to go with that. I'll stay hydrated. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of rainbow juice.
No.
Rainbow juice here.
Oh,
nice.
Now, normally there'd be like vodka or White Claw in it, but considering it's not even 10:30 yet, I decided to actually go with real water. So, but it's good.
Yeah. So I'm glad you're already there, Will. And for those of you that maybe don't know, Will and Matt, you know Will or have known of him for a while because you're a big fan.
Huge fan.
Just meeting him in person. Shut up. Meeting him in person recently, like actually having a chance to get to know him a little bit. And Will and I go way back. Like how long ago? 10 years, I think.
I mean, yeah, I first started with Chorus Barry back in, I think it was August of 2010. So it's crazy to think that it's been like a decade that we've known each other. It's actually, I can't believe it.
No, it's even weirder that like not only do we know each other a little better than most people know each other, because we actually live together.
You were my landlord, right? Like essentially you were my landlord. Yeah. I know Matt likes to tell the story about me being, kind of locked in the basement. I heard him tell the story.
It was a combination lock, and I give you the code every now and then.
Exactly. It's like, but when you change that code, I tell you, it was it wasn't pretty. But yeah, no, we have, you were the first, your place was the first place that I ever lived in Barrie, like all those years ago now. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And you moved up here. We got to know each other a little bit better as time went on. And, we had our Saturday morning coffees together. Our schedules were not the same, but we'd try to have Saturday morning coffee together before you went to work. And, it is Pride Month. And so I'm sort of looking back at the just over 10 years that I've known you now. And I know the place you were when you moved in with me in Mapleview. You hadn't even come out then when you moved into my house. And I see where you are now, and I might cry. I'm gonna get emotional because I'm so proud of you for the leadership that you have taken and how, you've come into your own. You've just really sort of accepted yourself, and you're now sharing your message of inclusivity and connecting with other people that might be struggling as well. So to see where you started, whereas, like I said, you didn't even talk about it when you moved in with me. It wasn't something we ever discussed until I think after about a year you'd lived there, when you officially decided to start telling people.
I mean,
let's take us back 10 years ago, or just over 11 years ago. We'll start there, because I think one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, because I know there's a lot of people that are still struggling, and a lot of people who maybe aren't sure where their place is in the world and are confused and might hear your story and of how this was quite the process for you, because now you seem very comfortable in who you are. You owned your truth and you're speaking your truth. So take us back, like almost 11 years ago. You moved into my house in Mapleview. You had not come out yet, and you weren't even discussing it. It was not something you and I discussed. We socialized, but it was not something we ever discussed. And so you were at a crucial point in your process of coming out, weren't you? Tell us about where you were at when you moved to Barrie.
Absolutely. Well, honestly, first of all, Tara, thank you so much for saying that about kind of where I am today, where I've been. It's always a journey. Life still continues, but thankfully, so I appreciate those kind words. That means honestly so much to me. Yeah, so at the point when I moved in with you, there was a lot happening behind the scenes, a lot that I wasn't sharing with people. I had kind of just been in this relationship with another man, really my first relationship, as a, not out, but gay man. And it was, no one really knew about this relationship, at least on my end, they didn't know. And it was one of these things where it had just ended before I moved to Barrie. So I was very like, okay, so I just went through this whole process and I didn't share anything about this relationship with anybody. I don't know if I can live. No, I know I cannot live a life like that, because if people know me, they know I talk a lot. They know I'm a social butterfly. They know I'm always sharing things all of the time, right? So I know that people also had their, you get a vibe. I always pick up a strong vibe with people when I'm in a room with them. So I know that people, are like, oh, well, he's gay. He just hasn't told anybody. Or obviously he's gay because, he likes this song or this movie or this, like, or he dresses this way, or, he has never had, I've never seen him with a girlfriend, like all these things, right? But I think that when I was moving in with you, it was like, there was two sides to it. I was very excited to start a new job and be in a new city. I'd actually just been in Northern Alberta, which was like not where I'd want to spend a long period of my life. And I was trying to figure out how I was going to do it. I was trying to figure out like, okay, I know it doesn't, in some ways it might seem like, you know what, you're close with your family. You have, my sisters who are twins are like my best friends, and I have such a tight, close-knit family. A lot of people, when I've shared my story, have a hard time understanding that. But I think the longer that I kept it in, the more I built up this fear, this anxiety, and it was kind of eating away at me, even when I was in this relationship, right? Because I'm also kind of lying at the point too, right? It's like, if I'm going to work and I'm commuting, your family's like, oh, so like, where are you staying with? Oh, I'm just staying with it, such and such a person, right? Who like wasn't my boyfriend at the time because I just wasn't able to share it. But then it's like your lives are getting confused and it's all this. And at the end of it, I just knew.
Carol will let me out of the basement.
Yeah. I just knew that I couldn't live a life like that. I didn't know how I was going to come full circle at that point. I really didn't. It was really, in some ways, the beginning of like really me truly accepting myself for who I am on the inside. I just had to know, I just had to find it a way to get to a point where I was comfortable and able to share that with, first of all, my family, my best friends, those people who know me but don't know this very personal, important, not all of me, but this very important part of me that I wanted to share with people. Obviously I was also going through a little bit of a breakup. So I was trying to deal with that and then trying to deal with like coming out. That's where I was, and in those days, I would have been like enjoying our conversation, but also fearful that you would have asked me something, fearful that you would have asked me. And I'm getting chills as I say this because it's been so long in so many ways. And it's like, I was like, oh my gosh, like, what if she asks if I'm seeing somebody? Like, what if she asks if I'm, is there, are any girls that you're interested in? Or, or if you said any, if you talked about sexual, like, it would literally freak me out.
And when you're living with someone,
and I get chills as I say this to you.
Coming up are pretty easy. It's pretty good that stuff's going to come up when you're spending so much time with people.
Yeah, and it just terrified me. And whenever I'd be in a room with people, even friends, coworkers, whoever, and they would talk about relationships, I would kind of freeze because I just wasn't in that place, right? Honestly, you really do have to accept yourself before you can expect the acceptance from everybody else. And I always say, you know what? Yeah, you know what? Live your truth, be authentic, live your true life, but do it on your terms. It's not for anybody else in the world to say, okay, well, Will, now's the time at 19 to come out. Now's the time at 30 to come out. It's like, it's one of those things where it's on your terms when you're ready. And that's the only way you can do it. I can't tell you how many times people have asked me, so because you have this great family and you have this close circle of friends and, you get along with your coworkers and all this stuff, like, why didn't you come out earlier? And it's hard for me to put that into words, right? I just feel that I just wasn't there. I hadn't experienced certain things. My focus at the time, I think, was more so on, you both know what this industry is like. It's a challenging business. although now we're in a great place where we have a lot of people who are, massive public figures like the world of Ellen DeGeneres and Anderson Cooper, who are out and proud and using their platform. Like, even back then, that was kind of just starting to come up a little bit, right? So you're worried, oh, am I going to lose my job? Is this going to happen? Like, all of these things, which I know to most people wouldn't seem like they'd be a concern. But I think when you're living, you are in a little bit of a dark place if you're not comfortable in your own skin. So that's kind of where I was at that point. Sorry, super long-winded.
That's okay. No. Well, I think, it's interesting because when we lived together, you asked me after you told me that you were gay. I remember you asked me, did you know? Like, and it was something I deliberately never asked you because I didn't know that you were gay. I knew that you were struggling, and I knew that you were lonely. And I remember sort of always feeling bad because I thought I did consider that as a possibility. And I thought, I knew you weren't, if you were not out about it. And I knew that you weren't quite comfortable talking about it. So I remember, like, there were a lot of weekends, I quote a lot because that's me, but there were a lot of weekends that I was, I would think about how lonely it must be for you. Like, you can't really talk to people. It's like you mentioned, you can't talk about such a big thing that's going on with you. So I remember always just feeling that you were lonely, and that must have been the loneliest time of your life, I would think.
I mean, that's a fair point. And it's funny because I'll be honest, like, in some ways, thinking back to those days, thinking back to really over a decade, it's like, that's not a way that I think about it often. But you're right. I mean, it makes sense when you think about it, because there's one thing to, have a social network of friends that you're hanging out with, getting together with your family, getting together with your friends. But I think that even when I was in a room with a bunch of people, I was lonely even in a room with a bunch of people, like, not even like living on my own or living with you. It's like, there was that loneliness because I was like, I was on my way to where I wanted to be, but that was kind of like the painful part of it behind the scenes, because I wasn't sharing a lot with really a lot of people at that point in time, if anybody. And I think that I just had to, it was hard, but I think that it was like, I also knew that I had to find a way to get out of that space. Yeah, I knew that I had to find a way to get out of that space. And it's even just talking about it right now, and just like, oh my gosh, it's funny how, like, I know it's hard to almost, when you move forward, to think about these times, but it also kind of humbles you to realize, like, now I'm out, obviously long out with my family and friends. As years have gone on, I've been more open about my truth on air, online. And last year, I feel like it really, for years, I've been thinking about how to share, like, my coming out story, right? Yeah. And it's like, last year, I think with the pandemic, and I started to do it, like, on air and on social media, I was just like, you know what, I don't care about anyone who's going to come for me. I don't care about anyone who's, like, hating on me, so to speak, because I was like, this has been such a crazy year. Like, 2020, by like a year ago, it was still crazy. Like, we had 6 months of, 4 or 5 months of what was going on with COVID. And I was like, I kind of feel like me sharing my story with people, and I still feel this way, I know it might have like a little bit of dark moments in it, or a little bit of struggle, a lot of struggle in it. And, I was different when I was trying to come out compared to like how I am now, for sure. But I think it's still a positive story. Like, there's a happy, it's not an ending, but there's a happy current state that we're in right now. Right. So, and I just feel like, so that's why I started to talk about it more so over the last year. And, because I think you're right. Like what you said, there are a lot, like, I personally know people who are struggling and who will come to me and say, you know what, Will, I can't come out because I'm from this background. My parents won't understand it. So I will get people who will reach out to me. And I don't think that would have ever happened unless I shared with more people, who I am, who my authentic self is.
How important is it?
That was one of the questions Matt was saying he was going to ask you about, the pressure with sort of becoming a spokesperson. Matt, your question was better. We were talking about this before. We talked.
And you can ask me that too. That's totally fine.
Well, I know because you and I had a conversation, Will, when Schitt's Creek won all those Emmys. I walked into your office and I asked you how important it is for inclusion and representation on a stage like that. Does that mean a lot for you that not only was it a gay character portrayed, but also, technically, I think bisexual character portrayed, but a creative genius behind that show. And now with you on social media and on air, you're almost in that role of representation for the LGBTQ plus community. Is that a ton of pressure on you, or are you cool just living your authentic life?
I mean, thank you again. Thanks for saying that. I appreciate that. First of all, I'm nowhere near the kind of platform that Dan Levy is, because he's just amazing. But here's the thing, right? I mean, you hear this a lot right now in 2021 with people in LGBT plus. You hear this like in the Black community. You hear this in so many other communities about how representation is so important. And honestly, it's not just something I say. I truly believe it. And obviously, like growing up, I was born in the 80s, teenager in the 90s. You really didn't get a lot of gay characters who were on TV that were relatable. Not that there weren't gay characters or gay male characters in some shows, right? But I just feel like having them on screen and then that being an image or like a likeliness that you kind of can relate to is completely different. And I think that with Schitt's Creek, I'll say that and then I'll kind of go into the second part of your question, is like with Schitt's Creek, it's like I just like fell in love with that show, fell in love with the characters. I have cried multiple times watching that show because I've watched it over and over again. I mean, the coming out, not to give it away, but some of the coming out scenes in there, it's just, and it's like, it is important. And I think it's so good to have that we have that, not just for like people in the LGBTQ plus community, but for you and for anyone, just to kind of see those images and like change people's minds and educate people that just because you're gay doesn't mean believe it or not, I don't walk into the studio with like a feather boa around my neck every day. And you know what? That's okay if you're gay and you do. That's just not who I feel I am, right? And that, I think when I was younger was something that I struggled with, is like, okay, like that person is gay, but I don't see myself in that person. Whereas when I see, David and Patrick, I see myself in both of them. I see myself as almost a mixture of the two of them. Like that's kind of how I feel. And in terms of asking about, do I feel that responsibility? Listen, I feel that like working in broadcasting and really like social media like this is just that extended platform of that. I do, as I've kind of like, grown and gotten older, I feel like it's something that it's a part of me. It's not, I don't want it to define just who I am, but I think it's important to share these stories because even in the last year, because I've been more open about it in the last year, is like I have heard people reach out to me, and not just gay people. I've had, trans people, people who define themselves as lesbians, like other groups within the group of LGBTQ plus. And so I feel like when someone sends, like this morning when I was sharing the story about getting ready for this, I got a message right away from someone that said, thanks for being yourself. Like, thanks for like not being afraid to be yourself. Right. Yeah. And it is hard because it's like, you do go back in time, like Tara was saying, and you're like, oh my gosh, like you almost kind of feel like two different people. And in some ways I describe it as this, like coming out for me was like, you're kind of just beginning your life in so many ways. You're beginning your authentic life. I feel responsibility, but I take that, I'm proud to have the responsibility is what it is. And I feel like, yeah, you know what, I'm not gonna lie, Pride Month, this is probably like we're in a pandemic, but this is like the busiest Pride Month that I've ever had. Because I know it's all serious, but I gotta joke for a minute because it's like, there has been, and it's been great to do, we've been doing a lot of on-air stuff, a lot of online content, stuff that's still coming, this included, but it's like, man, I'm like, is it Canada Day yet? No. I'm joking. I know, I understand how important Pride is and what it stands for and the history of it. But it is. But I think that to your point, yes, I mean, it is something that I don't take lightly. I am happy to talk about it at any time with anybody. And, you know, I think the fact that I wasn't always there, I know to me makes it a little more special, because if I was to look back at myself, like, especially like in my late 20s, I'm like, who is this person? Because it was at some point I was like, I don't know how I'll get there, right? So.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, you seemed almost like, it's funny how, like, my observation is because you went away for a couple of years and then, you know, came back, and just recently, like last 10 months ago, to me, you're still the great guy that you were. You're still Will Nash. Everybody loves you, but you're so much happier. Like, to me, you have this light turned on inside of you. That's just, you just seem so much, not that you were a miserable person before, you would never know it, but I, you know, like I said, I could tell there was an underlying sadness there, and I feel like that's gone now. Like, the delight inside you is, I'm sure, inspiring to so many people who are struggling with whether or not they can do it, and when they can do it, and how they should do it.
Well, it's true, right? I think that, like, people, you know, I think people think about me, think of me as being like always happy, or kind of like, you know, who you hear on the radio or who you see on social media. And it's all true. And like, but I think that once you share something so personal to everyone, and you're not worried about somebody, you know, finding out about you or thinking a certain way about you, it does, you kind of free yourself a little bit. Like, you kind of like let go of some of the insecurities. You know, as much as I feel like I'm a confident person, those were obviously insecurities as to why I didn't come out at a younger age, or why I didn't feel ready to come out at a younger age. And I think that, honestly, like, the biggest thing, like, before anyone, I know I said this before, but it's so true. Like, before anyone else can even attempt to accept you for who you are fully, 120%, you really got to accept yourself. And I know it's a cliche, but I always say cliches are cliches because they're true. And I think that, yeah, you know, even when I left, even when I left Barrie back in 2015, like, obviously, like, at that point I was long out and whatever, and, you know, and whatnot. And, you know, I worked in Toronto, then worked in Kitchener, came back. It's like, I think that I just got to this point when you saw me, or, you know, virtually saw me, is like, when you, I don't know, when you are living that more authentic, that more real, true to you life and lifestyle, you're just gonna, I think you're gonna shine a little more, right? And I think that you're not worried. Honestly, like, you guys know, there's been times where I've talked about something on air, about the community that I define myself in, or about pride or whatnot. And, you know, 99% of the comments that come through at Fresh, and really any outlet, even my own outlets, are positive, right? 99% are like, you know, yay you, go Will. But it's like, there is that 1% that isn't always accepting. And I remember the last time that happened, and it was like, okay, like, that's, because here's the thing is, I know there's a lot of people who are LGBT in several parts of the world, literally cannot do a tenth of what I've done in terms of talking about being out and stuff, right? But I think that, like, it bugs me, or it might frustrate me for a minute if somebody says something like, you know, homophobic or whatever. But I don't know. I think there's something inside myself that I'm just like, you know what? All right, that's that. And I know you guys always have my back, and my company has my back, and like my friends, you know, dust that dirt off your shoulders, right? In the words of Jay-Z. And it's like, you know, but there's a confidence, I think, that comes with time, right? It's like, it's not the same thing, but, you know, think about having like your dream job at like 20 years old. And then think about having your dream job at 40. It's like, you're just, you know, you're probably more ready later on in life when you have more experience to do that way. So yeah, and honestly, a huge compliment, because it's funny, you don't think about things in that way. Like, I just think, okay, like, I left here in 2015, grateful, thankful enough to come back for a job. You know, everyone's just gonna be like, oh, there's Will. You know, he left and he came back, right? But I guess there has been growth.
So, and I think you make an excellent point when you said, you know, you get that 1% of people. And I loved an infographic you put up in the beginning of Pride Month, because I thought it was so telling, because, you know, you're going to get the people that are going to say, but we've come so far. What's the, you know, almost like all the work is done. And I loved your infographic, and maybe you could speak a little bit to that, about how much work we still have to do.
Honestly, I think that when I left Barrie, Simcoe County in 2015, I was thinking like, okay, um, it did feel at that point as here felt as a community that was kind of close-minded. I felt like, and I'm partly joking, but I felt like I knew most of the gay
All the
people
gay,
in this area. Like it felt small in that way.
Yeah.
Partly joking. You know, I feel like coming back here, and this is even like with conversations with, my coworkers at Chorus, it's like, it does feel like a lot more people. Here's an example. I was driving to work one day and driving, I live in the North End, and I'm driving through like a residential section. And it's like, I saw these two men who were obviously together holding hands, walking down the street. Right. And I was like, okay, like I, as someone who is gay, was surprised to see that, because I'm just like, sometimes, and I never want to speak for one group, right? But sometimes the mentality in a smaller city can be a little harder for someone who is LGBT to live in, right? What we're finding now is a lot of people are like, okay, Toronto's too expensive, Toronto's too crazy, people are moving up here, right? I kind of sidetracked your question. What was your question?
No, I was saying how basically that there's so much work to do, not just locally, but around the world. You mentioned that, you would not be able to do this kind of work in some countries in the world. And it's not just in our backyard. We have to speak out locally so that it ripples out globally.
Yeah, no, that's true. And thanks for, re-asking that. That helps. I went on a tangent, but it's true. It's like, I feel like as far as that, as a society and as a community, we have come in 2021. Part of the work that we can do, and I don't even mean like, yes, there's work that people in my community can do, but even the work that you both are doing right now, and we're able to celebrate and commemorate, because before Pride was a parade or a party, it was a protest. And I think that sharing those stories and opening minds, opening hearts to something that, what, I think it's so important to never stop sharing stories like this. I know we do this in Pride Month, and we're all doing it right now, but I think that the work is never done, and kind of like, you just never know who you're going to surprise. Like, I'll tell you this kind of quick story. Is last year, when on air, I shared my coming out. I talked about being gay before on air, but it was the first time I'd shared my coming out story, and I was like, okay, here we go. Like, the butterflies are churning, and let's get ready. And it's like, I had someone reach out to me, and he said, hey, Will, I've been listening to you at the station that I was at for over a year. Really enjoyed listening to you. Didn't really think about whether or not you were gay. Never crossed my mind. I just enjoyed listening to you on the radio and like the station. But I got to be honest, I heard your story, and my girlfriend and I just had this big talk about you over dinner, because in his past, he was not always accepting of the LGBT community, right? And he was essentially saying what I had said had impacted him in a way that it essentially was the beginning of him changing his thought process.
Wow.
And I was like, I mean, my eyes are watering just talking about this. And it's like, he's like, I hope you don't mind. I know, because you knew that I was leaving for another job. Do you mind if, we keep each other on social media? I really want to be able to, support you in any way that I can. He'll ask, questions, completely expected questions. He tagged me in something on Facebook the other day, basically saying how he was supportive of LGBT, and owning, saying, what, like, I wasn't always this way. Like, he's like, I was not always this way. I wasn't always open and accepting. I said and did some things when I was younger that were just, plain mean or not right. And I mean, obviously it's a huge thing for him to say that, like, 3 minutes of me talking on air helped him change his mind and open his heart. And like, that's crazy to me. Like, it's just like, that's why I say it, like, that's why I share my life and my story in that way, because I feel like when I think about broadcasters in the platform that we have, because you, Tara, you have a platform, Matt, you have a platform, we all have these amazing platforms, which, you know, we're so grateful to have. I think that like when a broadcaster has shared their life and they've kind of opened up, and they can be silly and goofy, but then they can also be, you know, open and heartfelt and honest. It's like, that's to me is what, you know, I've always wanted to be, right? Is that kind of a broadcaster. And I think it took a while to get there, and not even really realizing that my own personal truth was going to end up being a part of that. Like, yeah, it's just so, yeah, we do have a lot of work to do. That's the thing. We do have a lot of work to do. It never stops. And, you know, I'm grateful that I'm able to share stories like this with you, and, you know, every day.
Now, what Will today? You want to talk to young Will?
Oh boy.
15 years ago, probably at the most, you know, going through a lot of turmoil personally, and again, not able to share with anyone. What would you tell yourself? What would Will today say to Will 15 years ago? What would you tell yourself?
Find another apartment listing. Keep looking in the back of the newspaper for a place to live.
You're going to be an uncle to a cat, and you're going to hate it.
Oh my God. Well, you know, I mean, first of all, let me talk about that. It's like, you know, I think that in some ways you didn't realize, although I wasn't sharing with you my personal self at that point, you know, having those conversations, having that coffee, like would have helped me. I mean, it did help me so much at that time, like having that friend, right? Because it's like, and where you didn't ask me, and like sometimes it's nice to not be asked, or people to like question you at a time when you're going through so much inside. But in terms of what I would have told myself, I think I would have told myself, you know what? You don't know what's coming. Know that you're so loved by your family who support you, by your sisters, your friends, your coworkers, your coworkers who are friends, and don't be afraid to be your true self, right? And don't worry about, because there's gonna be people who come for you, or who at you on social media, or who say, okay, well, you know what, you know, if I knew he was gay, I wouldn't follow him on social media. If I knew he was gay, I wouldn't, you know, listen to his radio show, or whatever it is. I think it's like, you know, don't be so worried about what everyone else is going to think about you. I mean, I think it was, you know, gay men love their divas. And I think Dolly Parton said it best. Wasn't it Dolly Parton who said, it's none of my business what everyone else thinks of me. And that's so true.
That's great.
Right? It's none of my business what everyone else thinks of me. Right?
That's so true. It's so true. You're making me cry.
And that's true. So I think I would have said, you know what, you're gonna go on a road, you're gonna go on a journey. And although, like, yeah, I'm proud of who I am, I'll speak about my personal life, about growing up, and, you know, now I think that it's like, it is still a journey, right? Because it's like, you know, if I was to start a new job, which is not gonna happen, if our boss is watching, because they're always like, don't leave. But it's like, you know, you kind of come out every time you work somewhere, right? You start a new job, you get a new group of people who are not gay or not in LGBT. You feel like you kind of have to do that. But it's, you know, I think I would have said, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Don't worry so much. You know, don't lose sleep over it. Don't stress out about it. Just know, because even when I had conversations with my family about it, like, it was hard for my family, not because I was gay, but because I hadn't shared this with them. Right?
That's interesting.
And like, because it wasn't until really I was like early 30, like 30 years old, that they were hearing these words out of my mouth. Right. Well, and I mean, I was terrified. Like, I was still terrified to say it. I was like, oh my gosh, like, even saying those words, what's that going to sound like? I am gay. Like, like, can I even get that out of my, but it's like, my mom, I mean, to this day, all these years later, and hopefully she doesn't mind me saying this, but she'll hear it anyway afterwards, is like, she still struggles with why I wasn't able to share it soon, right? So because, you know, they've raised, you know, and to be fair, they always said, you know, if there's any, you know, there's nothing that you can say to us that will make you not love you. They 100% said that, right? I can't really describe to you why I didn't. It was just kind of the journey that I guess I was probably supposed to be on.
unfortunately, you still today you read stories about people coming out and the parents' reaction, and a lot of them are upset. And I don't know. To me, there's just something so sweet that the reason she was upset is that you didn't share it sooner. I just think that just speaks to her character as a mother, which relates to you as an awesome dude.
No, thank you for that. And, you know, I hope she watches this because maybe that might make her feel a little bit better. And I try and explain it to her that it's hard to explain the timing of it. Like, I feel like for me, you know, to go back to that relationship, like it was like the end of that relationship for me really allowed me to begin my coming out journey, right?
Mhm.
Because obviously that was a factor in the relationship. You know, he was
Yeah.
out, I was not. So if anyone is watching this has ever been in a relationship with someone who was out and you were not, or vice versa, you know that's going to be a problem, because most people, you know, want to be able to say, hey, let's go out for dinner with friends, or let's, you know, post a selfie on Instagram. Like, believe it or not, I didn't want to post a selfie on Instagram. I know that's hard to believe.
You said no to social media? I knew this was going to be a serious discussion and we might learn a few things. I had no idea.
Yeah, behind the scenes, right? The real Will Nash, right? But it's true. It's like I still to this day have these conversations with my mom where it's like it's not personally you. Like I've said before, I mean, I can't control what was around me. You know, yes, I overheard conversations said by other people. Yes, you know, if someone who is gay is on TV, like Elton John or whoever it was at the time, you know, you do kind of subconsciously track people's comments, and you do subconsciously track or remember if somebody said the F word right in front of me. Not the 4-letter one. And you do, you know, you remember these things, or you remember, like, you know, if you have, you know, tastes in, say, like music, or, you know, a TV show or a movie or whatever, where it's like, okay, like you almost feel like, you know, people are kind of judging you for your taste or your interests, right? It's like at that time, like it was more so, you know, like judged upon, I think, and it still is. And I think that like all like your environment, I think, is going to affect you, but I can't blame it on anybody, really. I think it's like it's life. And for me, it's like my journey was meant to happen, my coming out journey was meant to happen 2 years later. And yeah, so thanks for saying it's beautiful, because hopefully she sees this and hopefully she can, you know, agree with it. I mean, you know, you have these conversations with your parents, right? It's like, yeah. I don't know. I don't know how, I don't know how to justify it any more than that. And just say, you know, like, but that's kind of how I felt about that moment.
You know, I love seeing how much your family celebrates your truth too. I love seeing your sister.
Gosh.
They're really a part of it.
Okay. So this, my sister gave me this on the weekend.
Yeah.
I love it.
And like all of these, you know, bandanas that are around here came from my sister. I have like Pride Heart cookies over in my kitchen. And it's like every year, like they will always ask, so every year since they came out, like, so how are we going to celebrate Pride this year? Like, honest to God, as much as I'm the most like festive Christmas, you know, celebrate birthdays kind of person, like it's my sisters specifically who are always asking, you know, okay, so what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? Right? Like last year, especially, you know, how could we do it? And obviously I realize you're celebrating me, and I appreciate that, because I do know that, again, listen, like there's a lot of people in this world, possibly, obviously in the city, who don't have that. And, you know, I do have a very loving family, and I do have, I'm so grateful to have that support in my life. And I don't take that for granted, because I literally know people, close friends, who don't have that support. And that's, you know, that is, I can never ask for more. Like I could not ever ask for more support than that. So
as allies, what can we do for you? What beyond sort of changing our profile pictures and, you know, with the frames and not that's great, you know, to the pride flags, and what can we do that really means something for you?
Well, thanks for asking that. That's a great question. I think that like the biggest thing that people can do is understand, because I know this kind of sounds obvious, but just do a little bit of research,
Mhm.
and find out why we still have pride in 2021. Look up at the history, New York City, Stonewall riots. I mean, not to plug, but we do have a great page right now on our Fresh 931 website. If you're watching this currently in June 2021, which does delve through the history, does talk a lot about pronouns, does talk about why Pride started, why it exists, why it will continue to exist today. So, get educated, like so many issues that are happening right now. Do your research. Also, have conversations like this one.
Mhm.
Be open to these conversations, and they don't always have to happen on Zoom. They don't always have to happen on air. They can happen in your backyard with 9 other people right now. Like, like I was gonna say in your home, but I guess it can't happen in your home.
Yeah.
But and just ask questions, and show support. And I know what you're saying. June. I feel like especially this June, like corporations have just been like, which is good, but it's like like just remember it around the year and have these conversations and show support. And I don't know if standing up is the right word to use, but just show support in the ways that you can. And, if you have any young people in your lives, if you have any, kids or nieces or nephews, like, just like, even sometimes the way we pose questions, right?
Mhm.
Your boyfriend yet? Your girlfriend yet? Maybe just, make it about a person instead of like about a specific sex, because that for me was always like, what?
Yeah.
Right. So it's even
Yeah.
still, I'm just like, even though I'm long comfortable with these questions, it's like, it's kind of like how you position certain questions to make somebody feel comfortable, right?
Yeah.
You hear the word inclusive a lot. Like, I think you're doing a lot by having this conversation, and you both have platforms, and telling your friends and your listeners of the morning show and listeners of our radio station about these conversations is just so huge. And that's why I think I've tried to this year. Yes, everyone needs to have fun. There is a celebration element of Pride, but also try and educate the different communities within the LGBTQ plus community is important to do. So, and hey, you know what? And I'll put this out to you both, and I'll put this out to anyone who sees this right now. Never be afraid to ask me a question.
Mhm.
Whether it's, a message that you don't want to ask, you don't want to call into the radio station, or you don't want to, post something on social media. I will answer it if I can. And if I can't, I'll find out and help you understand better. So,
And I can speak to that very personally, because I have had some questions for Will, none with ill intent, but some I could tell he was a little like, I don't know if we should be asking that, but here's the answer, because I know it's coming from a
no, well, the
place
thing
of
that people need to
curiosity.
know about you, if they don't know this about you, yes, you're a super funny guy. And we joke a lot. Like, we joke a lot on the air and
Oh,
social
yeah.
media. But I mean, having a conversation with you, and I mean, this is basically one-on-one. Having a one-on-one conversation with you is, you are like the sweetest guy,
Oh,
and you really are. You really, and you know what? You're listening and you're responding, and you're very there. You're very present. And we've had some heart to heart. So it's like,
oh yeah.
it's I think people need to know that about you, because you're not just the clown from 5 to 10 every morning.
Oh, thanks, Will.
95%. Yeah.
And Tara knows it too. And I remember, like, when I started back here, Tara was like, the more that he razzes you, the more that he kind of pokes you, the more that he loves you. So
He loves you. Oh my God, he loves you.
No, and I love you both. I do. It's just I'm so happy to be in this place where people want to have these conversations. We everyone just kind of supports each other. And I don't know. I don't know a lot of workplaces, radio stations that I've worked at, and it goes beyond who I am as a person or how I define myself. Like, we really support each other, and we only want everyone to kind of see what we do, and this is a part of it, right? So it's like, it's great.
Well, I am personally so proud of you. I know this has been such a journey for you, and it's it's so humbling to see somebody have so much growth over the years as you've had in a relatively short amount of time. I mean, you were already a great guy, but I mean, this is just, I feel like this has sort of filled out the empty spots for you, the parts that you hadn't been able to sort of be public about. And, you know, I'm just so proud of you for having the courage to do that. Not just that, there's a real unselfishness in sharing that with others and being willing to be a connection for them, because sometimes that can be draining. I know if someone's constantly calling you and asking for advice, and it's just that you're not only accepting yourself, but you're so concerned about other people feeling accepted and included. And I just think that you're just so courageous, and I just am so impressed with you and so proud of you, and I could cry. So
no, I appreciate that, and that means honestly a lot coming from you, especially because you've known me for so many years. And it's, you know, I mean, I don't know if I touched on this, but like one of the main reasons that I do like to share is because I do think back to, you know, little Will Nash or Willie Nash, like, and it's like I think about those sort of moments where, you know, I never really knowingly really had anyone in my family who I knew was gay or was out or was in the community. And I think that if me saying something on the air or posting something on social media can help one person, then for me, my job is done. My job is done. And you know what? It can be tiring, and it can be emotional, and it can be draining, but that's part of the work. You know what I mean? Like that's part of the work that needs to keep happening. And you know, I love having that connection with people, right? I remember being at one point in my life, which doesn't really relate to this, but kind of does, is like my aunt, I think I was, you know, wasn't working. And my aunt, who, you know, does very well for herself in the financial industry, we were sitting down having, I think, a glass of wine. And she said, and she's like, yeah, like, she's like, so how's it going? What are you going to do now? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I'm so stressed. I'm like, I've applied here, I've applied there, da, 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 da. And she's like, I'm not worried about you. And I'm like, well, you're not? Like, I'm freaking out how I'm going to, like, you know, get my next full-time job or whatever, right? And she's like, you're a connector. Like, by nature and by heart, you're a connector. So you will be where you are supposed to be. And I always remember that conversation that I had with her, because I thought about it. I was like, okay, so, you know, she's successful in her career and in her life. And she's like, she's not even like, she's not worried. She's like, and she would be the type that would help in any way that she could. Right.
yeah.
And I was like, and that's I think where it comes into this too, is that, yeah, I am a connector. That's a huge part of the reason why I love what we do, what we get to do every day. And so, yeah.
Well, you're home in more ways than one. And we're so glad to chat with you, Will. And I can't wait till we can see you in person on a deck somewhere, my deck.
Yes, I can't wait until we can do that, because I've been seeing your pool Instagram stories. and one of my favorite moments with you since we've been back is, like, last week we had a staff meeting, and it was Tara's birthday. And you were like, you know, almost a bottle in deep of rosé on the staff meeting. And I was almost screaming at the team's meeting, because I was like, oh, I love that she's just like sitting there by the pool, sipping rosé. Like that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do.
Do you want to, we're talking about connections. Do you want to maybe plug your Grindr profile, Tinder, Plenty of Fish? Let the people.
You know what? I'll say this. People know where to find me.
You
know where to find me. You know where to find me.
You don't need any of that stuff. Okay, well, it's great chatting with you. We'll do a 9. If there's anybody that has to be left off at 9 or 10, Matt can always sit out.
He can go and make us a snack, right, Tara?
I'll park the cars.
I won't show you the basement. It might be a trigger for you, so I won't show you our basement.
I'm coming home.
All of a sudden, I'm at the top of the stairs. You push me down and lock the door.
Like old times, eh, buddy?
Oh my gosh, no. Honestly, this has been great. I appreciate you guys doing this, and it was wow. It was like almost like a therapy session sitting here.
That's what we're here for. No charge.
I love it.
What? We'll see you later, bro.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Much love to y'all. Happy Pride.
Thank you.